Welcome to the second episode of the New Stack Agents, this time with Andrew Lee from Shortwave, who I've met, geez, it's over a decade ago now, hasn't it? It's just such a long time that we've been in this business.
Yeah, good to see you, Frederic.
Yeah, same here, same here. Yeah, back when we first talked, we talked about Firebase because you were one of the co-founders there with James Tamplin. Things have changed quite a bit since then.
Yeah, both for me and for the world.
Indeed, indeed. And so one thing I've been thinking about, this show is all about AI and AI agents. And I talked to you back in 2022 when you first launched Shortwave. And at that time, it wasn't really about AI yet, right? At that time, what were you actually building?
Yeah, so this company we started in 2020, and the initial plan was just to build a better Gmail. And we had a lot of fairly traditional ideas about how to build a better product experience. Like we wanted to change the way that threads were displayed. We wanted to give you better search. We wanted to give you some cool collaboration and sharing features. And we started down that path and took just about 2.5 years just building out the core of a better email client, and that kind of worked. We got some users, they're paying us, it was growing, but it didn't really take off like crazy. And around the end of I guess would have been 2020, yeah, 2022, we started noticing that these large language models were actually like maybe production ready. Maybe you could build some real things with them. And we said, hey, wait a second, we have all your email. We have, not just all the human correspondence you have, but we have all the receipts you've ever gotten and your newsletters and the calendar invites from other people and like all the SaaS notifications from Asana and Notion and whatever. And man, this is just a crazy corpus of data. And these language models can interpret this in ways you couldn't before. And so when we talked in 2022, um, we were pivoting into this new bright new world of like, what if the main thing we were doing is not trying to give you better just like basic email capabilities, but was like trying to like leverage all that data with AI to give you just a much more powerful AI experience.
Sure. Let me take that back though a little bit. Like you spent a lot of time at Google, obviously the home of Gmail. What made you think that you could build a better email client than Google at the time?
Oh yeah. So being at a big company, I got a good sense of kind of what are the sort of institutional and sort of structural challenges that companies face, and like what are the things that they're good at and then what they're not good at. And there are certain things that Google is amazing at, right? If you want to, don't compete with them in like, indexing the web, for example, or like ads. Don't compete with them in building a cloud platform. But there are certain things that for structural reasons, just the way the company is set up, just the way the culture of the company works, they really struggle to do well.
Hmm.
And as an example, the big reason they bought Firebase is getting that kind of like really easy to use developer experience was a really tough challenge for them. And so they often, when they buy startups, it's like, hey, we institutionally we haven't been able to solve this problem. What if we can just kind of buy that solution?
Hmm.
And it became clear to me when I was there that Gmail was one of the areas of the company that was really going to struggle to innovate. There were a lot of different stakeholders that had a lot of different opinions about what Gmail should do. There's a lot of legacy. There's a huge number of users that used the product in 1,000 different ways. There was this tension between like business users and personal users. And since there were all these stakeholders pulling in all these different directions, it was very hard for like a product manager on the Gmail team to do anything.
Yeah.
And we said, hey, they've got 2.5 billion users. Lots of those users pay, and we think they are going to totally stagnate for a long time. Let's go after this. And I think the best data I can point to is what happened with Google Inbox. If you
Hmm.
remember Google Inbox,
Yeah, describe that
they
quickly for those who might not remember what Google Inbox
yeah.
was.
So basically, Google figured out in the mid 2010s that uh, the existing Gmail experience they had was kind of outdated. It hadn't really thought hard about what to do when you had like a lot of email coming in, how to do things well on mobile, and they built this totally new product called Google Inbox that incorporated just a ton of like very interesting new product ideas. And people really liked it. It had a big following, especially among journalists. Actually, that's one of the reasons we got so much press
Absolutely.
initially.
Loved it.
A lot of journalists used it, and I thought it was a great product. A lot of people on our early team thought it was a great product. And the inbox folks went back to the main Gmail leadership. Like Gmail put many of their best people on this new team, and they built this, they put it out there, it was working well, and they went back to their leadership and said, okay, we've done it. We've made this product that's awesome. Like, let's push this out to everybody. And the Gmail team basically said, too risky. Like we got all these users over here and they're all used to this other thing. And do we really want to like kind of force them to migrate? And do we really want to have two products? And they ultimately made the decision, despite the fact this had like tens of millions of users on it, they killed it off and without really a replacement for those users. And I think when that happened, a lot of the people that were working on that product left and went to do other things. So for example, there were several people on the Firebase team that were like refugees from the inbox team, which is before they actually shut it down, but who like kind of saw the writing on the wall there. And then the folks who were left in the Gmail team had a very clear signal of like, don't try to innovate too much, right? If you innovate too much, you might, your project might get killed. And so, if you look at the last, 6 years since that product got killed, Gmail hasn't done a lot. They've kind of shoved a Gemini sidebar in there, but like, there's been no like radical efforts to like rethink the product.
Yeah. If you innovate too much, you have to go and work on Firebase.
Yeah.
But that was a very sad moment. But then, so 22 comes along. You're working on this product. What was it that convinced you that LLMs were at the right stage to really push forward with this?
Yeah, it was like mid to late 2022, and I think we've been seeing the chatter on Twitter for a while, and I still thought it was kind of a research project, and I think it was really just the launch of ChatGPT and the growth rate that we saw there. That was like, oh wait, no, like people are really using this stuff, and that would have been like fall 2022.
What did that early product look like? What could it do?
You mean specifically for like the AI features?
Yeah, specifically for that.
Yeah. So the first thing we wanted to do was just test the water. Like at the time, like right now, we're sort of used to everything having AI in it, but at the time, nobody had any AI features in their products, and we just wanted to know if people would be excited about this. If we put this out there, would they freak out? Would they actually use the features? And so we wanted to put out just the simplest possible AI features we could, which was initially summarization. Which you had to do on demand. It wasn't like the instant summary at the top. You had to like click a button and then you would like wait a little while and it would like come up with a summary like in a modal. We had a translation feature. We had a like action item listing feature, but all of them were like you basically like click a button or select a menu option and then a modal pops up and you wait and like a thing gets spit out. And honestly, none of them were terribly useful except maybe the summary feature. But people talked a lot about it, right? There was a lot of hype. We got a bunch of press from it. We got a bunch of signups. A bunch of people paid us for it. Definitely enough excitement that we decided to double down.
Sure. And you had to wait. Everything was slow because the models were slow still. And is that the reason? Kind of why did it take so long?
Yeah, the models were slow. It also cost, right? So today, basically anytime you do anything in our app, we're making like 5 LLM calls. Like if you snooze an email, we're calling an LLM to figure out like what the recommended snooze time is. If you open an email, we're auto summarizing it. Like there's all this stuff that we're doing just in the background all the time, every time you click a button. To do that in 2022 or 2023 was incredibly expensive. And so we were like very careful about doing those calls. Now we do it all the time.
Because the costs have come down to the point where you can do it and the cheaper models are good enough to do this quickly. Is that what you're saying?
Dramatically, right? So so we are running for the summaries, for example, we use Llama on our own GPUs. It is I don't know the exact number, but like orders of magnitude cheaper than what it cost in 2023 to do the same stuff with state-of-the-art models at the time. But today, that's a small, cheap model.
Let me take that back. You're running your own GPU. I mean, I'm assuming you're renting GPUs somewhere. Are you?
Yeah. So we have kind of 3 different ways we run models. So we use OpenAI, we use Anthropic, and then we have GPUs through Google Cloud. We use Vertex, and then we run a bunch of open source models on those. And we use the different models for different things. So the conversational agent, like all of the sort of like complex agentic stuff, we use Anthropic models because we think we have the best ones there. For some of the places where we need the smarts, but we want maybe speed or like some slightly different behaviors, we use OpenAI. So for example, autocomplete is using OpenAI models. And then for the places where we really care about cost efficiency, we're running open source.
Got it. Well, maybe that's a good point to explain what Shortwave looks like today, because I've seen it change over the years, and full disclosure, I'm a user, so I've been playing around with it a lot. But what does it look like today? What can it do today?
Yeah. Do you want me to give a quick demo?
Yeah, if you want to, if you're able to. Let's see if we can.
Sure. Let's do that. And I'm just gonna show my normal inbox here.
All right, you're brave. I would not do that.
We're gonna do it live. Give me one moment. Okay.
That's the fun of a live show. We can do whatever we want to. There you go.
All right, cool. So this is just my actual inbox here, and we give you, on the left side of your screen, this is just a normal email client. It does all the normal things you'd expect an email client to do. You got an inbox, you can open them up, and like this is the email we exchanged earlier, and like see the threads. But the killer feature we have here is on the left. We have a thing that really looks and acts a lot like ChatGPT or Claude. And you can talk to it like you would any other LLM product. But the killer thing is it knows about the client on the right. It can see what you see on your screen, and it can go off and call APIs to look up any information it needs. It can search your email, it can look at your contacts, it can check your calendar, and it can even integrate. We have this an MCP integration, so it can integrate with all your other tools as well. So you can go after your Asana and your Notion and your GitHub and whatever else you need. So as an example, I can do things like, whose podcast am I on today? And here it's going to go off and it's going to actually look up some data. So it checked my calendar and it found, here's some great information about that. Frederic, cool. And then I can say things like, it's not just reading, I can write. So I can say like, let's reschedule this, right?
Hey, too late.
Yeah. This meeting. I don't want to do it right now. And it'll go check my calendar. It'll figure out some times, hopefully, to recommend that we reschedule this to. The one at 11 sometime next week. There we go. So I found some times in my calendar. It's suggesting some stuff.
And that's important to note, right? That the calendar is integrated here as well, which is it's very similar to Gmail, kind of in the right pane there, right sidebar. We can add the calendar. So.
Yep, and it actually interestingly it found a different meeting on my calendar here at 11. Didn't do quite the right one, but if I was more specific about, because I actually have a conflict right now, but I can do things like, also I can send emails. So I can say, send Frederic an email and tell him I'm going to be late. The number one use case for us is writing. So we do a really good job of helping you write replies. We can do style matching. So you'll notice it went and like searched for writing examples. So it found a bunch of emails that I sent in the past to kind of see like, how does Andrew usually write emails when he's rescheduling things? And then it kind of wrote in my style. So I can, click a button, it can search in a new email. We also have autocomplete. So if I go over here, I can say also, and it'll actually like recommend some things, and I can just tab complete them. So if you use like a code editor, you might be used to that sort of experience. Yep. We can also do like fairly complex analysis. So I can do things like I can go over here and say like, based on the emails I've sent and received over the last day, what are my top priorities? And it can go off and run like some fairly complex searches. One of the cool things that we do is we actually import all of your email data, we embed it, and we index it in ways that Gmail doesn't support. And so we can look up things based on concepts and ideas rather than specifically keywords. And so like finding like important emails, for example, is much easier in our product.
Yeah, I used that feature a lot. The help me plan my day, which is one of your kind of recommended pills there. So that
That's
helps me a lot finding emails I didn't even know there were, and reminds me of meetings and things like that.
that's a
Talk to me a
that's a
little
tough
bit
one.
what happens in the background there when I do that search. Like, what does that stack look like when it, does something like this, which is, pretty complex.
Yeah. So it starts actually before you run that search at all. So the moment you connect Shortwave off to your Gmail, we start an import process. We just start streaming on all the emails in your archive into Shortwave. We take those and we run those through an open source model that's running in Google Cloud
Yeah.
that generates an embedding. We take that embedding and we write that to a database. We also write that to an Elasticsearch cluster, and we write that to Postgres. So we have these actually 3 different databases. We have Pinecone for the embeddings, we have Elasticsearch for full text search, and then we have Postgres for some of the like metadata-based searches. And then when you type a query into the AI and you say, hey, look up this information, the first thing that happens is the LLM translates that into the right searches. So many of the things that you do maybe not need a search. If you need to write an email or schedule something, it may not need to look up any emails. But if it figures out I gotta look up some emails, it will do what's called a tool call, and it'll generate some structured output saying, hey, I need more information. The information I need is like email information, and that tool call can take as arguments the concepts you're looking for. So if you can actually do this yourself, if you want to just type about : in the search box, you can say about : you can give it a string, and we'll do an about search. When that search runs, we can combine, so this is all our own code, but we can combine the information in those 3 databases. So we can combine the metadata that's in Postgres, the full text information that's in Elastic, and the semantic information that's in Pinecone, and put those together. So you can run searches where you say, hey, I want emails that are like from Frederic during 2022 that are about podcasts. And all that can be combined, and then you can return results to the client. And then those emails get fed back into the LLM and says, hey, okay, you asked for this type of email. Here they are. We feed the raw text of those emails into the large language model, and then it does whatever it needs to do from there.
So tool calling, obviously, UStack agents, it's all we've been thinking about over the last few months, I think, is how are these models using tools, right? How well is that working for you? Because often I come across like really great demos, but in reality, things, still fail sometimes.
Really well. And I think it's changed dramatically over the last year. So we started doing tool calling actually about 2 years ago. Before any of the major model vendors had it like tool calling built in, we kind of figured out that this was the right way for us to architect. And so we built our own sort of like tool call logic where like the LLM would spit out XML, we'd parse the XML, we identify that that was a tool, we'd go call the tool. And so we were doing tool calling 2 years ago. And then I think it was 2 Decembers ago, OpenAI came out with tool calling built into their APIs. And we tried it. And what we discovered at the time was that it felt like anytime we had it run a tool, it actually just got dumber in general. And having it just like spit out XML and parsing it led to better results. And so we didn't use their tool calling. And then last summer, right around this time last summer, we gave OpenAI tool calling another try. And we found that the newer models were doing a better job at reasoning with tools. And so we started using tool calling there. And then the big change actually happened in December of last year when we switched to Claude Sonnet 3.5. And we discovered that it seems like Anthropic has been doing some like very focused reinforcement learning specifically on like agentic tool calling use cases. And like last summer, this time, the OpenAI models, they could effectively call like one tool.
Right.
But you couldn't really get them to call like a bunch of tools or like a sequence of tools. And the Anthropic models starting December were able to like call a tool, look up information, take that information to figure out the next tool call another tool, and do that, sort of in an endless sequence. And the result of that was a radically smarter agent. So I think, if you've been a long time user, you probably noticed that like the AI, kind of worked mostly up until December, and then like January, like 12th or whenever we launched the new agent, suddenly it got really smart. And that was driven by that switch to Cloud Sonnet 3.5 and a rewrite of our AI to allow like these like long sequences of tool calls.
Yeah, yeah. What's it been like for you? Because we often talk about switching models and, using Open Router or something like that to do that.
Yeah.
But that always means you have to rewrite all your prompts and other things to kind of, what's that been like for you making that switch?
So our experience, our kind of understanding of the current state is that Anthropic's models, specifically for like agentic tool calling use cases, are so far ahead of the competition, and that includes OpenAI and open source from Meta and Google stuff, that uh, there really isn't a contest right now. And so the only reasonable thing to do if you have a product like ours is just use whatever the best Anthropic model is. And we see so much value in getting these models out quickly that we found that the best way to validate this stuff really is just to like roll it out to users and see what they do. So basically, the moment Anthropic comes out with a new model, we put a public experiment out with the new model where people can opt in. We give it a few days of testing, and then we just roll it out live.
Huh.
And it's definitely kind of a move fast and break things approach, but people really want those latest models, and we are pretty sure that like whatever the new thing from Anthropic is going to be the best thing out there. And so far, that's worked really well. So we did that with Cloud Sonnet 3.7. We did that with the 4 series models that just came out, which by the way are like way smarter than what they were before. So I've been very happy with that release.
Yep. What is it that isn't working well for you yet, though? Where do things still break?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's really changed a lot over the last, I'd say, 9 months is the ability for you to dynamically add stuff into the prompt. So a year ago, anytime you changed models, anytime you added a tool into the prompt, you basically have to totally rewrite your system prompt to make it do anything sane. Because like any little tweak in that system prompt, the thing would like fall over. And as the models have gotten better, they've gotten more robust to adding stuff in. So MCP, I think that the technology that really unlocked MCP was just the ability for you like dynamically adding a tool into a system without having the system fall over. It wasn't, the standard itself is like very simple. But the blocker of that was like anytime you like just dynamically add a tool, you'd have to rewrite your system prompt, and that kind of broke it. But once the models got good enough that you could dynamically add them and it would do something sane, you had this explosion with MCP. I think the limit right now is you can't add very many of these before things fall over. So I have like a Notion integration turned on, I have a web browsing turned on, but like I leave off many of the other integrations that I might want, because if I add 10 of them in, it starts to, the reasoning starts to break down. I start to see a lot of errors and stuff. So I think, yeah, one of the things is like, can these models scale not to just having a small number of integrations, but many integrations? And you got to keep in mind, like each integration might have many tools. So like the Asana integration is like dozens and dozens and dozens of tools. So yeah, I think we really need models that can handle like 1,000 tools and without breaking a sweat. I think that's what we need.
Is it? I mean, one thing I keep hearing is that kind of one of the best practices these days is to give every agent one tool and have them kind of figure it out that way, because once you add too many, maybe not one tool, but maybe up to 5, 6 tools or something like that, because after that things start to break down and they don't know what tools to call anymore. Has that also been your experience?
I think there's pros and cons. I think you can get more reliable behavior if you keep the tool set small, but the downside of that is you can't have the LLM like reason across a broader set of tools. Like there may be creative solutions that it can come up with to solve your problem if it understands the full range of what's possible. Yeah. And so I've had this discussion with many people. I think for the product that we're building, in our case, the thing to do is basically just like, especially if we're willing to pay for the really expensive models, is just throw all the context into one big model and then throw the smartest model you can at it. There are other cases where you're trying to be more cost efficient, or where you have a much more structured approach, where maybe like a hierarchy of sub agents works better. But that's not what we do.
Yeah. So you're basically using one agent, lots of context. Is that kind of what it looks like then today? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for the main kind of conversational AI. I want to know, we have a lot of other, we have autocomplete and all these other AI features, but for the main conversational AI, it is a a single iterative agent with a whole bunch of tools and it can sort of pull in the tools it needs at different times.
Yep, got it. What's we've been talking a lot about you mentioned MCP, A2A, maybe not that important for you if your agents are not talking to each other that much, but what's your thought there, like the development of MCP? How has that changed what you're doing?
Yeah, I think this is really exciting, and I think that the most exciting piece is not the MCP protocol itself, but it is the models reaching an intelligence level where this type of thing is even possible. They can reason about dynamic context that they pull in from tools or from other agents, and both A2A and MCP like build on top of that. I don't know which protocol or protocols are going to win here. There might be new protocols that come along. We are architected in such a way that we can support them all. It seems to me like MCP is getting a ton of adoption. We've seen a lot of people launch servers for it. A lot of people sort of build middleware servers for existing services. We've seen a whole bunch of clients get built. There's a lot of communities kind of forming online. Our users have been really excited. So if I had to bet on a horse, I would bet on MCP right now. But the environment is changing so quickly. It's it could be a very different answer in a year. But I think anyone who's building a product today in the AI space needs to think hard about, hey, we are at a point now where it's pretty easy to let your AI connect to any other tool the user wants to. What should you do with that? I think is a question everyone should be asking right now.
Yeah, what should you do with that, and how can you keep that data safe as well? I think, right?
Yeah,
So,
you may not want to
aspects.
do that,
Yeah,
but it's possible.
Yeah. Well, what are you thinking to do next? Without giving off. Well, you can give away your roadmap, but without giving away your complete roadmap. But like high level, what else is on?
I mean, I think there's a lot of obvious stuff on our plate here. If you've used the product, lots of little rough edges and things missing on mobile and stuff like that. But I think the big focus area for us is really driven around asynchronous execution. So I think we do a pretty good job today if you're sitting in front of your computer and you're typing and asking it to do things. But a lot of the use cases people have for AI is like, I wanted to do it when I'm not in front of my computer.
Right.
Like the email comes in and I want it to go do a bunch of processing ahead of time for me, or automatically reply, or whatever it is. And we have some very simple features here now. So we have this thing called AI filters that allows you to run a prompt, and based on the prompt, you can like add a label, or you can archive it, or you can make a bunch of like relatively simple actions. But you can't keep a Notion database up to date with every VC associate who's emailed you, or take all the uploaded files and put them in Google Drive. And we want to take that to the next level and say, hey, what if your AI filters weren't just AI filters, but they were like AI agent, like asynchronous AI agents, so that every time you get an email, you can run the full agent and do everything the agent is capable of. And not just on email receipt. I think there's other events that we would want to handle, recurring tasks, or every time you add a label or things like that. So I think look out for powerful asynchronous, automatic execution of like complex agent workflows.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. That's where MCP will come in and help you a lot, I'm sure. So that's going to be helpful.
I think that MCP is going to be very, very core to our strategy going forward here. I think there's so much potential for we're focused on these kind of power business users, but like automating business processes that start and end with emails.
Yeah, no, for sure. Which most still do.
Yep, definitely.
Surprisingly. What else? One thing I was thinking about, how much of the just development is happening with the help of AI right now in the company?
Tons. So we internally we've tried a lot of different products, and we're still using a bunch of different products. But I think the two that we use the heaviest by far are Claude Code and Cursor. I think we've been especially impressed by Claude Code with Opus. We've had some pretty impressive cases of it, like one-shotting like complex bug fixes or like new features, where you give it the right prompt and you give it 5 minutes to think, but then it just comes back with a working PR. I don't think it's replaced any humans on the team yet, but I think as a fraction of the code that's being committed, it's now possibly possibly the majority of the code written at our
Okay.
company is now AI, and I think that number is just going to increase and increase and increase, and everybody's using it every day.
Hmm.
So yeah, we're heavily using AI for coding.
For sure. Hasn't replaced anyone yet, but maybe you're making fewer hires because of it at this point, maybe.
Potentially, or hopefully
Hmm.
just moving faster, right?
Sure, sure.
We also, it's not just code either. There's other processes that get automated. So, for
Hmm.
example, the blog post and the newsletter around our MCP announcement were AI generated. Basically, I wrote a prompt, and the prompt included an outline of what I wanted to say, and then I copy pasted a whole bunch of other docs with context. So I copy pasted like some PRD docs. I copy pasted a bunch of previous blog posts that we had written that I thought were well written, and I copy pasted like some general information about MCP. But I had this big long prompt that was basically like, write a blog post with this outline, and then here's a bunch of information that you probably want to know, and then here's some examples of well written posts. And it generated a blog post that was like 95% of the way there.
Hmm.
And I tweaked and modified it from there, but I think that saved me several hours of work. And then the newsletter was basically like, okay, now take this blog post and like, give me a newsletter version of it. And here's an example of the past of like the newsletter version of the blog post that I did.
Hmm.
And so yeah, things like
Yeah.
like our content is all AI assisted at this point.
Hmm.
Our even like our candidate screening process, there is some AI automation. We auto categorize emails that come in from candidates. I parse out the resumes and stuff, looking for certain types of information, because we can parse PDFs in our AI. So every business process that we have are looking for ways to streamline and automate processes everywhere we can.
Sure. Well, makes sense. The writing part always worries us journalists, but that's why we're doing podcasts now too on video, because that's the only way to go.
I want to note I'm the one still writing the outline, and the outline I
Fair.
think is what you want to say is the most
Mm,
important part. The thing it really saves you with is like, how do I phrase that well,
mm.
which is not my strength, and so it's helpful to have some assistance. But for other people, it may be.
Totally, totally. What else gets you excited right now about AI? What other areas are you super interested in?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I'm very excited about dynamically generated UI.
Hmm.
So one of the like if you think about it, like the models are at the point where they can generate code for UIs pretty well. I can go into Claude Code and be like, hey, give me a widget that does blah blah blah, and it does a pretty good job there. But if you think about it, it doesn't just have to do that when coding. Like you can just live in the app, you could be like, give me a widget, and you could take the HTML and
Yeah,
you could just
yeah.
like shove that in a modal, and boom, you got a UI. And you may not want to like directly eval HTML, but we've had some experiments where we just gave it a list of sort of like pre-configured React components, and we're like, hey, build a UI that solves this problem using these elements, and it's
Hmm,
done a pretty good job.
hmm,
And I see a future where you can sort of get purpose-built UI to solve any problem that you have. For example, like you're reviewing candidates, right? And like maybe the ideal email client when you're like reviewing candidates is different than the ideal
hmm.
email client when you're handling customer support. And so you could, I think the future ideally would be like you go into the AI and be like, lay out my client differently so that it's really optimized for me to like read resumes, right? And then it just like reconfigures, and then suddenly it's like a resume reviewing tool.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think that's totally possible. I think within the next couple of years, it's gonna be a lot of apps that work that way. So
Hmm,
yeah, dynamic UI I think is a big one. I'm I think just generally excited about continuing improvements to tool calling, continuing improvements to large context sizes, continuing improvements to speed, because I think there's a lot of things today that you can do, but maybe are impractical. So like RAI, for example, like one of the biggest complaints we have is it's just slow, right? It can
hmm.
go, it's genius. It can go off and like write an email from me, but like, if I'm just running late to a meeting, it's much faster for me to just type for myself. But if these things can get much faster and much cheaper, I think there's a lot of use cases where it'll suddenly become very valuable.
Mhm.
Because, for example, like we can do things proactively. Um, what else am I excited about? Obviously, our product, asynchronous stuff, doing things
Async,
automatically,
yeah,
doing things while I sleep. Yeah.
that seems to be a trend in the whole industry, I think, right now, where people want just, autonomy and have the AI do just stuff for them. Which
Cost is a big driver
yes,
there, where like, yeah, if you want to run a full agent every time you get an email, that could be really expensive. So yeah,
yeah, yeah,
every little decrease in costs opens up new use cases.
yeah. Though the models are, you said it earlier, the models are getting cheaper overall, but the expensive ones are still very expensive, right? Like to run all of what you're doing on Opus probably wouldn't be an option compared to running it on Sonnet, kind of the mid-tier model from
And
Anthropic, for example.
we keep finding ways to use more and more tokens. So like
Hmm.
as the cost of AI has dropped 100x, our usage of tokens has grown by more than 100x. So at this point, I'd say about 2/3 of all of our infrastructure spending is large language models right now.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
just expect that fraction to grow.
Yeah, I think it was Jensen Huang from NVIDIA made that argument at the GTC conference. Like, even though we're making these systems more efficient, maybe people will just keep using more and more tokens over time, which is will keep NVIDIA gainfully employed, I'm sure, going
I think they're
forward.
going to be okay. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate it. Thanks for being back.
Yeah. Thanks for
Talking to
having me
me.
on.
Absolutely. We'll do it again at some point once the next models launch, and you're just refiguring that UI for me as I just figure out things to do with your product. Next week we're going to have Antje Bart from AWS. She leads part of their developer relations there about AI, and we'll keep doing this every week, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern time. NewStack Agents, like and subscribe. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Cheers.
you.